Hi, my name is Joseph, and welcome to Digimon Seekers Chapter 3, Part 3, Unit 11, Digital Missing in Action. So let's go ahead and begin with the first quote that I have picked out. You got to quit excuse me. You got to quit coddling Kasauki, Saya. Bringing him a change of clothes? Who are you? His mother? Yoling said, between between mouthfuls of pork bowl before chugging a bottle of tea, like her life depended on it. I'm his wife. Not his mother, Saya corrected. And it's fine. It was on my way. I'm just saying any hour of your precious life that you spend on this bozo is an hour wasted. Mm-hmm. Here's your soup, Kosuke, Saya said, handing Kosuke a container. Thanks, Kosuke replied. And you had to eat your salad too, Saya chided, fussing over her husband. They were very much newlyweds, and Tamanari Rusunji smelled softly at the domestic scene before him. Yoling, however, suddenly felt like she was a freeloader sitting at the Risinji's dinner table. Tamari let out a laugh. So the reason why I like this quote is just because I think it does a good job of setting up the dynamics between the characters, this new set of characters that we're being introduced to. So far, we've been primarily with EG and the connections that EG is making. Excuse me, everyone, my hair, it is drying up. And the connection that EG has been making with everyone. And we have the only character who's been introduced so far directly has been the professor, and yet despite that we don't know much about him. We're starting to get more history about his professional and personal life. And what I mean by that is that in this part we also get the beginnings of Ryuzenji Laboratories as well, which is pretty cool. And I think the story is doing a really fine job of making the audience let me rephrase that. So I did say we've been directly introduced to the professor, and we've been indirectly introduced to Tartarus because he was the interviewer with Doromon, right? But of course, he didn't let EG know about that. EG did communicate with him a little bit, but not an actual conversation. EG did pass by Yolene, but again, it's not like she was directly introduced, not like she was part of the story at that point when she was in Chapter 2, when Leon and EG had their meeting in the cafeteria in the Ryuzenji Laboratories. And then for Saya, she's a completely new character. She has not even been mentioned before this. Yet despite this, I really enjoy this warmth and this comfortable setting that Digimon Seekers is setting up. And not only that, I think it's really cool too, because I'm not going to lie, when I first read it, I kind of was on Yolene's side as well, thinking to myself, well, what's going on here? Saya, Kosuke is an adult. He's a graduate student, so meaning that he is over 22 at the very least. So why are you indeed coddling him? But then as I kept reading it and it gets revealed that the newlyweds, it kind of flipped a switch in my mind. I was like, oh, well, no wonder she's quote unquote coddling him. It's because they're still in their honeymoon period. They're not that the relationship is new, but they just taken the relationship to a new level. I'm sure that they were a boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance before they got married, and yeah. So again, I just really appreciate the dynamic that's being set up here, especially the way that it ends. How the professor does notice the domestic scene set up before him, and it does impact Yolene a little bit. It doesn't escape her attention as well. Yolene, however, suddenly felt like she was a freeloader sitting at the Ryuzenji's dinner table. I just like that a lot because it says the Ryuzenji's dinner table because, well, you have the professor, his daughter, and then the son-in-law, who would be Kosuke. Excuse me, I'm more than likely mispronouncing that. But again, that's why I do like this quote. That's why I appreciate it. And the way that Saya says, make sure you eat your salad too. It's just very adorable. What's so funny, Professor? Yoling asked, reading into his laugh 5 million different ways, none of them good. Yoling has no patience for men with a couple missing life skills like you and me, Professor. Is that so, Kosuke? What would you say are missing? The assistant professor began. How about we all eat quietly? Just enjoy the feed I brought to you. Excuse me, my cat's toe covered the line. Just enjoy the feed I brought you for. Now I'm just stumbling with my own words. That's my own fault. Just enjoy the feed I brought for you, wild animals. Saya said to a chorus of yes, Saya, from smiling faces all around the table. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I do appreciate that. Sometimes I just stumble for some reason. Well, the first time was my cat's tail. Damn you, cat's tail! I'm joking. I love my cat. But the second time was just my own reading skills. And now I lost my train of thought. Excuse me. Let me quickly reread that. Oh yeah, so this quote I think also adds to the characterization. It's not really adding much to the story. I won't argue that. But it does add to the individuals that's present in this setting, in this scene. The fact that Koski says that Yoling has no patience for individuals like, rather men like us who are missing life skills. I was also quite curious about what life skills specifically Yoling was referring to. For Koski, obviously, I would I would argue it's personal hygiene, taking showers, having clean clothes, and feeding oneself. But then for the professor, maybe because I'm just being biased because I do like the professor's character, but I don't know. I feel like the daughter bringing her father food. That's not really a sign of the dad being lackluster. I think it would be quite adorable if a daughter or a son brought food to their mom as well, their mother figure. Or maybe she's talking about in regards to his social skills. So for Koski, it's his hygiene skills, and then for the professor, it'll be his social skills. Because we mustn't forget that it's been established that when individuals try speaking with professors, sometimes he's too engrossed in his work, like when Yolene brought the mail, or his little quirk of saying good morning despite it being the afternoon or the evening time. He might be saying good morning because he's so transfixed he forgets how much time has passed as he's been working. So maybe that's what that's being referred to. The fact that it wasn't specified though, that Saya interrupts and she has her own little quip. I liked it a lot because that tells me that she probably does agree with Yoling a little bit. That maybe there are a couple of instances, not instances, but a couple of details that Koski and the professor that they could work on. Maybe Koski, I'm sorry. Maybe Saya does agree with Yoling, but since they're in their honeymoon phase right now, she being Saya is able to dismiss Koski's lack of hygiene at this particular moment. But as they continue in the relationship, as they get used to being a husband and wife, maybe she'll be less patient about that. Again, I'm not gonna lie, this quote is primarily towards the characterization of the individuals, and I'm always a big fan about that. You can't really enjoy the story if you don't care about the characters, the individuals partaking in the story. And then just the way that ends too, no one's gonna argue against Saya. Instead, there's just this chorus of yes, Saya, and no one's taking offense as well. It's just a really friendly banter going on amongst friends and family. Suppose the professor's hypothesis is correct that there are living AI forms in there. Saya offered, with the professor winning out over Dad this time. It often felt as though her brain flipped a coin every time she needed to refer to him. Tamanari, the professor, himself rarely thought about it very much. He loved his family, but he truly lived for his research, a scholar's scholar, so to speak. If there are AI life forms, we might be able to keep them as one keeps a pet. Like this one, for example, Tamanari said, gesturing toward his monitor. It was filled with numbers that, upon further inspection, changed with the rhyme and reason, with a sort of natural odor. It's so cute, Koski said. Isn't it just, Koski? I do believe this one. Yes, I think it might be amphibian in nature. Yes. It might have a duality to it, Koski agreed. You're the only ones who think you know that, Yoling snarled. Yoling snarked as the two men pored over the numbers. But Yoling, just imagine seeing it all for yourself. Not just a bunch of numbers, but the real thing with your own eyes, Sai said dreamily. So two aspects about this quote. The first half of this quote is further characterization of the dynamics that's being set up at play. So really quickly, at the end of part 2, the story did establish that the professor was working with 3 individuals, 3 partisans. I did list out Yoling, Koski, but I was unsure who the third individual was. I just want to quickly explain. I didn't really think it was going to be Sai just because I didn't realize that she was the same age as everyone else at the group. I thought she was a little bit younger and she was just helping out, just the stereotypical child helping out the parent. So that's why for me. Also, I'm not going to lie, a little bit of nepotism as well. I mean, it is the daughter, and she's not just doing any regular group assignment. She's, I would argue, working with really exciting research. And as the story has pointed out, that this research is at the forefront of discovering, the digital world and its relation to the real world. So that's why at the time, I'm not a big fan of nepotism. Usually I won't get into it, but there are a couple of examples of nepotism that unfortunately exists in the real world, like within certain service groups / medical groups, and then unfortunately the political world as well. So that's why Sai wasn't really at my forefront. It's not that I didn't think she was capable, it's just that the fact that she was a daughter kind of excluded her from being that third individual for me. But I'm loving how the story is doing such a great job of, I think, of making sure the reader understands that Saya is a capable individual. I do believe I quoted this part. If not, I'll make sure to mention it. But the first half of this, how she's not sure to call the professor or her dad, which label, which title to use. I think that's very telling. That tells me as a reader that Saya is not just a visitor when it comes to his research, that she's well aware of his research and, dare I say, an active participant in his research. He's not just a, I guess a really quick example would be like in The Simpsons when for the Malibu Stacy doll, a daughter tells his dad, because the dad works in marketing, and the daughter tells the dad, "Hey dad, you work in marketing, how about you do advertisements for the Malibu Stacy doll?" And then she becomes much more popular. It's not that kind of scenario. What's going on instead, I think, is that the professor, in this instance being the marketing individual, he's actively engaging with his daughter, explaining what it is that he's doing, and she's not just coming, "Hey dad, you're a professor, should we research this?" Rather she's going, "Hey dad, did you notice this connection over here? Maybe that has some prevalent information to help us connect to our last conclusion that we came up with." Something like that, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But this tells me again that she's an individual that's not unaware about what's going on. She's an individual who's an active participant within the professor's research. So yeah, I just think it's also quite adorable as well how it's further expressed that for the professor, he's never had this issue. What issue? Should he call his daughter or student or a lab assistant, whatever it may be? For him, his research is always at the forefront. So this essentially tells us that we haven't met Mrs. Ruzenji yet, if she is present. But if she divorced the professor, it might be because he puts his job way too much at the forefront, right? But we don't know anything about that yet. I am looking forward to discovering those details. I might be wrong about that. Maybe it's been expressed that the wife has passed away, but I don't recall any detail like that. If I'm incorrect about that, please do let me know. But yeah, so I just appreciate how he's a scholar, quote, so to speak, right? And the second part I like about this quote is it's just a light-hearted feature as well. I just like how they're referencing to Betamon. Betamon seems like, because he was at the beginning of the story as well, Digimon Seekers. He was the Digimon that Iji was quote-unquote hunting because the professor wanted to research Betamon. And so just the fact that Betamon's cropping up again at the in a very natural, organic way, I would say. I think it's done well. I just liked it, and that's why I wanted to read it. I could have stopped reading after the Tamahari said, gesturing toward his monitor, but I just like that detail that the story is including. Again, it makes it feel natural, a natural extension of how the professor first discovers Betamon in its data form. And now when he's able to actually research with Digimon, it makes sense why he would want to see one physically. Well, I guess physically, right? Because it was hollowized when Iji brought him the Betamon. But yeah, the next quote is the last quote. Koski and Assistant Professor Ruzenji had classic researcher brain. Saya was a genius in her own right, with a list of accomplishments longer than Yoling's, but they were probably worried about her looking too young and childlike. Yoling couldn't argue with that. The cops once escorted her home, mistaking her for a middle school student out well past her bedtime. "Are you sure?" Yoling asked the assistant professor. "Sure about what?" "I mean, I was born Japanese, but my father's a naturalized citizen, and my mother's from." Yoling chilled off, thinking about the many hurdles that stood in their way. The digital world research was on the cutting edge, bumping up against cybersecurity and national defense deployment. A company seeking government venture funds would no doubt trigger a background check against corporate espionage, which would complicate matters both for this new venture and Yoling herself. It may not be the most important factor, but she worried her nationality would become an issue. "And how is that any a problem?" Tamahari said, looking Yoling straight in the eye. "Yoling," Koski said gently, "he's saying you're the only one who can do this." "Oh, okay." So this is going back to what I said earlier about how the story does a good job of clearing up Saya. It's not just nepotism. I like how this detail comes after the whole label detail. Because for me, I think, again, that tells the reader that Saya has not been a guest, or rather, let me rephrase it, that Saya has not been a stranger with the professor's research, that she's been a guest within it, actively participating with it. And then we get this other detail further establishing that Saya is not just working with the professor due to nepotism or due just to luck, but rather because she's earned her position. She's earned her place to be amongst Kosuke, Yoling, and her father / the professor. She was a genius in her own right with a list of accomplishments longer than Yoling's. Small detail longer than Yoling's, but I think that does a lot because I would argue so far up to this point as the audience, we probably feel that Yoling is a competent individual, that she's someone where if things were to go wrong, she would do her best to course correct the situation and get everything back under control. And why will we have these feelings about Yoling? It's because, well, she's the captain of the Digipolice. She wouldn't be the captain if she was just an emotional individual who couldn't control herself, nor the situation, nor other individuals. And the couple times where she's been present in the story, she seems like the type of individual that stops BS from occurring. She wants things straight to the point, right? So if Saya is a little bit more accomplished than Yoling, I think that's meant to shock the audience a little bit, but not in a negative way, but in such a way that makes us go, oh, okay, Saya, she's just as capable as Yoling is. She's not a helpless individual. She's not passive. She's just as active as Yoling is. So I really do like that. Those two details put together, the professor / dad label, and then this detail right here, really cleared up who the third individual was that worked with the professor, Yoling, Kosuke, and Saya. I have no qualms whatsoever about that. Again, I was projecting a little bit. I was being biased because I'm not a fan of nepotism, but I'm happy to see that it's looking like the story is establishing that there is no nepotism at play here. All of these individuals are accomplished and have their own merits. So furthermore, what I also like about this quote is just the camaraderie that's present. The professor has his team, and although he might be engrossed and transfixed with his research, I would argue that he does care about the team. He just probably doesn't explicitly say it, but the way that he tells Yoling what's the issue, why is there going to be a possible issue with your nationality, why for him he doesn't even think about that. It's because he relies on Yoling. He truly believes in her as an individual. I like how Kosuke tells her at the end, Yoling, he's saying, you're the only one who can do this. And in other words, that he's trusting her, that he knows that Yoling is the one that will get this idea that the professor created, that she'll be one of the ones to help this idea become real, to make the idea go into motion, to go from the professor's head and out into the real world. And hopefully that makes sense. Excuse me for moving around my hands a lot too. I'm not away from the video right now. I clicked away, so I'm not sure how I looked. But yeah, so that's why I was a fan of that quote specifically. And I guess excuses I'm right here. I'll just end it by reading the rest of the part. Ryuzenji Laboratories was on the move. Each bit of data on the main monitors described a creature living in the digital world, scurrying around, going about their life. Things are about to get very busy around here, Kosuke said. You'll be seeing a lot less of me, though. I'll be on the front lines getting things set up at the new office. So, you've already found a new office. Nice. What about your university credits? You don't have enough, do you? Saya asked with a note of genuine worry. I can stay enrolled here for a few more years, but I don't necessarily need to graduate at this point, Kosuke replied. I'll hire him even if he doesn't, Tamari said with a smile. Yoling let out a heavy sigh. Not exactly a great thing for an educator to say, Professor, she chided. Huh, perhaps not. That's how part 3 ends. So since I did read this part, I do wonder that maybe that was meant to be foreshadowing. Things are about to get very busy around here. You'll be seeing a lot less of me. Because the fact that he'll be creating these sons of chaos and becoming Tartarus. But I didn't mention this nor highlight this because of the next line. I'll be out on the front lines getting things set up at the new office. So I thought that was just me being an English major looking at something that's not really there, or looking at the blue one and the blue box and just really hyperfixating on the details. So that's why I didn't go read this part in the main portion of the video. But since I read it, that's why I wanted to explain it. And furthermore, again, Yoling, even though she seems like a cold individual, she still has warmth in the inside, the worry and the concern that she shows towards Kosuke if he's not able to graduate on time. But yeah, so before I end this part, just really quickly, I do want to say that it's looking like the parts for Chapter 3 are a little bit more shorter compared to Chapter 2. I'm not too distressed about that, but I'm not going to lie, I got used to the length of Chapter 2. that when the new parts of chapter 3 and I'm left a little bit like, oh, it's over already. But even though it's coming in smaller portions, I think maybe the reason why that's occurring is because it seems to be less progression of the main story, and now we're going back to set up more of the world building. So that might be possibly why. But I think so far Seekers is still doing a really great job of parceling out this information. Part 1 began with Koski and the operation that he was doing. Part 2 then gives us information of where it all began, and then Part 3 continues with that information. So we'll see what Part 4 will take us. Maybe that's when we'll finally get back to the present time, and we'll continue moving forward from there. So my question now is, why do you think Kosuke is going to become Tartarus? I think so far the answer is probably clear and obvious, but who knows? Maybe the story will throw a curveball at us. We think we know the answer, but a specific detail would change the perspective on that a little bit. I still do believe that the professor is not going to be the antagonist. He might have antagonistical features, but maybe at the end he'll realize that he made a mistake, or he realized he went about everything the incorrect way. But I'm really hoping that he's not just going to be the antagonist or just straight up the enemy of Seekers. Thank you so much for watching or listening. I really do appreciate it. Have a prodigious day and take care, everyone.